Okay, so maybe you caught this last night. President Barack Obama was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And you know what? It was pretty funny because Jon Stewart's an awesome comedian. But mostly it made me sad because millions of Americans get their news almost exclusively from this show. In fact, more young voters tune into The Daily Show's coverage of Republican National Convention than they did Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC. And Stewart has been listed by Newsday as one of the 20 most influential media players shaping the influence in this election. So to get back to why this upsets me, it's because people trust Jon Stewart and see him as more than a comedian. They look at him as someone who cuts through the corporate media BS. And not only did he not do that last night, but the conversation between President Obama and Stewart was more of a love fest than an interview. Listen to the kind of responses that Obama gave to his softball questions.
4 years ago, I said I'd end the war in Iraq. We did. Said I'd pass health care reforms, make sure people don't go bankrupt when they get sick. We have. Said that we would refocus our attention on Al-Qaeda. We have. Made sure that...
Yeah, dude, let's all applaud the killings of those alleged terrorists. But honestly, the whole ending the Iraq war bit, there's nothing really to take credit for because the troop withdrawal was a timeline that George W. Bush negotiated with the Iraqi parliament, which was then codified by a binding agreement. In fact, Obama worked for months to try to pressure Iraq to extend the deadline to the point where U.S. military was actually kicked out. And let's not forget, we're not ever leaving Iraq as long as tens of thousands of security contractors remain stationed there. And moving on to the Affordable Care Act. Yeah, it's great. Healthcare is now accessible to millions of Americans, but let's not forget that it didn't even pass with a public option, which would have been the most fiscally responsible thing to do. It's not a surprise, though, when you consider who, in part, drafted the bill. Liz Fowler, former VP of WellPoint, one of the richest health insurance companies in America. Then Obama brags about being so tough on Al-Qaeda and is met with resounding applause and enthusiastic cheers, which is kind of unsettling when you consider his tactic. Drone warfare propagated across the Muslim world with a 98% failure rate. So I guess people are celebrating the fact that Obama has set himself up as judge, jury, and executioner. So what's next?
There's some things that we haven't gotten done. I still want to close Guantanamo. We haven't been able to get that to Congress.
Funny. You say Congress has blocked you, but since you had a majority in Congress your first 2 years in office, and after that, you could have just passed an executive order to close the torture house. But you didn't. Yeah, it's much easier to pass the buck, isn't it?
There's strictures that he put in place that people might have thought were government overreach in that, and that maybe they had a mind that you would perhaps tone down. Well, you haven't.
Well, you know, the truth is actually we have modified them and built a legal structure and safeguards in place that weren't there before on a whole range of issues. Now, they're not real sexy issues. They're not the kinds of things that you're going to...
You don't know what I find sexy.
I'm still the president.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
Bow to the king of the drones. But seriously, I actually thought Jon Stewart was going to follow up with this uncomfortable question, which is why it was so disappointing to see that he didn't. Obama just used the John Yoo logic of, oh yeah, we dealt with our illegal practices by creating a legal framework to justify our illegalities. Then he follows up by saying, remember, I'm the president, and this isn't a sexy enough topic to talk about. Yeah. I guess it's not very sexy to talk about how you not only continued the Bush administration's egregious violations of civil liberties and warrantless wiretapping, but expanded them all across the board.
At any given time, something screws up, and you make sure that you find out what's broken and you fix it.
Find out what's broken? Really? Really? You know what's broken? The establishment you represent, sir. Instead of addressing the real problem of a corrupt system based on inequality and two-tiered justice, you fight the symptoms with partisanship and reward corruption, like you did with BP when you gave them record contracts after they poisoned the entire Gulf, or continued to employ Blackwater after they lawlessly massacred hundreds of innocent civilians in U.S. war zones. So, what did we learn from last night's conversation on the difference between the two candidates?
When you think about it, it is two sides of the same coin.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Obama's right. He and Romney represent two sides of an imperialist, corporatist coin, an ideology that's running this country into the ground. What's worse is that Jon Stewart didn't have the balls to confront Obama on any of these hard truths. And for those of you who think that Jon Stewart's just a comedian, check this out. A study from Indiana University showed that The Daily Show was as substantive as network news. So if you're discarding Jon Stewart's role in the media machine of news delivery, think again. And while Comedy Central has responded by saying that they are just a comedy show, not a news show, it doesn't detract from the fact that 50% of young people go to this program to get informed on the news. Here's the real point: Obama, or any other politician for that matter, wouldn't waste their time going on The Daily Show if it didn't make an impact. Jon Stewart has a massive platform that influences millions of people. And because of this, he has a civic responsibility to ask the tough questions that others won't. But he won't do that because his bias is blatant. He has an agenda to support the establishment. And in the process, he perpetuates the two-party paradigm. And that's the problem.